Everyone knows that it's not Valentine's without 1-800-Flowers.com. So whatever you do, don't forget the flowers. Right now, when you order early from 1-800-Flowers, you can get a gorgeous bouquet of assorted roses starting at $24.99. It's the perfect way to say I love you without breaking the bank. Don't put this off. Quantities are limited, so lock in your roses starting at $24.99 today at 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hello and welcome to mini episode number 415 of Real Life Ghost Stories, and I have one spooky story for you today, and this story came in on the 31st of October 2024, and our story today comes from Bree. Listening to others' experiences has made me brave enough to share mine and know for sure that I won't sound crazy. I am submitting my experiences growing up in a haunted home. My home that my older siblings have also lived in and also experienced paranormal events. I will share their events as well as my own. I primarily experienced the bulk of the activity. I did experience a traumatic event in middle school that could be the root of why I experienced such intense events. If my trauma made me more vulnerable, at the perfect age too, if something needed energy in that house, mine was perfect for it. I grew up in Eureka, Missouri, a small town about 30 minutes out of downtown St. Louis. A very small town that has since grown, but is still small, known for Six Flags and filled with countless banks and gas stations and senior living centres. Lots of senior living centres. There is also a ton of history in Eureka. A little that I will share as it provides a good backstory to my story. Maybe where the land came from is part of my hauntings. The area was first inhabited by the Shawnee Native Americans until forced out, and then was used as a farmland, eventually bought out by builders and turned the land into real estate. The real estate my parents bought and still live in. The hotel in Eureka holds a lot of history and is known for having the resident ghost Addie, whom supposedly died by falling through the window of the barn and now haunts the hotel. 2 children have also died in the indoor pool in the last 20 years or so. This hotel and one-time carriage stop for travellers who needed a night to stay was perfect since they had horse stalls, all of which are still on the property but used for other things. You can, however, get married in the original barn. It's next to Six Flags and is where all the tourists will stay to visit Six Flags. We're also about 20 to 25 minutes from Union, Missouri, the popular Screaming House. The history is quite interesting. A Google search will pull up lots of stuff. My story now is one that consists of many encounters. I will say some encounters stand out more than others, and some are shared with my siblings. My normal is definitely not like most others. I was born in 1989 and lived in Eureka. I grew up there, moved back home there, and my parents are still living in that home today. My experiences were experiences with the paranormal over the span of ages 10 until now, and I'm now 34. My encounters happened mostly between the ages of 11 to 18. At this time, the terror I was experiencing was almost traumatizing. I'll do my best to keep things in chronological order, including important background information, as my parents moved into this house in the early 1960s and the haunting started then, when my sister Kim and my 2 brothers John and Bobby lived in the house with my mom and dad. Their experiences, as well as my sister Heather's, will kick the story of my haunting home off. I, though, experienced the most. And this submission spans 70 plus years in the making. First, important background. My very young parents moved to Eureka, Missouri from St. Louis City around the early 1960s. I believe they bought their home in 1963. It was a freshly built home in a freshly built neighbourhood, in a town that was far enough away from crime but close enough for my dad to commute. Eureka was new, it was different, and it was so countryish my siblings say their friends didn't think they had running water or electricity. My dad was an undercover drugs and violent crimes detective with the St. Louis City Police. He sought to move my mom and my siblings to a safer environment. Thus, he picked Eureka. My dad remained a St. Louis City lieutenant throughout the 60s, 70s and 80s, and retired in the early 90s, when I was born in 1989. I, however, came as a surprise. My parents married very young, 16 and 19, and they had their first child shortly after their marriage and 2 more back to back. John, Bobby and Kim are my 3 oldest siblings, with Bobby dying just a few years ago. Heather is their 4th, closest in age to me, but still decades apart. I was a complete surprise, born to my parents at the ages of 44 and 47. We're all horror enthusiasts and we're all paranormal enthusiasts, but that's because of the home. My dad, not so much, but I watched him go from a non-believer to absolutely having to believe. I know the house is what has made us all the way we are. Kind of the weird people that are normal but have an insanely haunted home and stories. My 3 oldest siblings, John, Bobby and Kim, are the first to live there along with my dad and my mom. My dad still mostly works nights and he's working undercover. So he's gone most nights, and when he is home, he's sleeping. Upon moving in, my siblings explored the land around them, because that's all there was to do in Eureka. We played in the woods as kids, something I'm not sure kids do anymore. Venturing through the woods, it didn't take them long to find scattered tombstones throughout the area next to our home. Definitely too close for comfort. There were plenty of bare spaces and plenty of spaces where there were clear marked cemeteries. What happened to them? No one seems to know. I also explored the woods as a kid, and at the age of 10 I remember this particular gravestone dating back to the 1800s. This tombstone was by far one of the biggest tombstones I've ever seen, just thrown in the woods. This one was well over 5.5 feet, elaborate with a cross design on the top. Others were small and unreadable, some were small squares with crosses which we believe indicate a baby or a small child's passing. There were lots of those, and lots of broken gravestones, unreadable gravestones, and all of this far too close to home. Lots of homes, not just my home, but there were gravestones behind many people's homes, just unreadable. My siblings, as they have told, thought they hit the jackpot finding these tombstones. As anyone would be, they were entranced. My brother, a history buff, immediately tried to figure out whose land it was. The history of the land within my neighbourhood pointed to a few large farms once having the land, and before pushing them out, Native Americans had the land. I have always considered this original Native American land turned into farms with gravestones scattered around my backyard woods. It was not long into living in the home that my siblings and my mom started experiencing things. Upstairs they would hear chaos on the main level, starting with their garage door opening and closing, doors opening and closing, people running up and down the stairs, stomping around the kitchen, and kitchen cabinets flying open and slamming shut. As my siblings would tell me, they were not about to go downstairs, but were sitting on the staircase peeking into the small view of the kitchen they could, but seeing the cabinets open and close, with my mom sitting with them, lights flickering on and off, parties outside on the deck, with sounds of a large group of people talking and playing music. They didn't immediately tell my dad, knowing that he wouldn't believe it and wouldn't even entertain the idea. John, my brother, was a target of one or more entities in that home. He was tormented by sounds of a phone in his closet ringing constantly, a doorbell coming from inside his closet, shaking of the closet doors, and witnessing my mom's glass of wine turn upside down on the table, wine inside. In his room, he experienced things like the lights turning off and on when the light was unplugged, a phone ringing in his closet, a doorbell going off in his closet, knocking on his closet, whispering in his room, hearing people run up and down the stairs, and hearing what sounded like a party outside on my parents' deck, with people talking and walking around. He watched my mom leave a glass of wine on the kitchen table, and when she turned around to go upstairs and was talking to him, they could hear the glass move. When they turned around, the glass of wine was upside down on the table, still filled. My sister and brother experienced the whispering, hearing people run up and down the halls, the poltergeist-like activities that would go on in the middle of the night. My siblings did not live at home long, starting their own life shortly after high school. Heather became the only child at the house. Around middle school age for her in 1989, I came along, and I'm sure my sister was thrilled. Heather experienced the normal things that always happen in the house: whispering, running up and down the stairs and hallway, shutting doors, turning off and on lights, making the phones ring, etc. This, for Heather, all started at puberty age. I never knew that girls and puberty seemed to be the large trigger for paranormal activities. My siblings would talk about this, asking if anything started happening in the house yet to my mom, when I was just entering middle school. Not knowing why then, or what they meant by things in the house, as they teased a lot, but I would find out quickly. I by far had the most intense experiences of them all. I imagine it gained energy as time went on, and I can say with all honesty, I was likely a great source of energy to feed off, as I was quite dramatic in high school, always up to something and always having big emotions. When Heather moved out of the house, I was in 5th grade, middle school, and the only one at home. While I was the only child, I did become an aunt at 3, so my nieces and nephews grew up with me. He was then the only child at home. My brothers and sisters quickly had kids, and I became an aunt at 3 years old. My nephews and nieces are like brothers and sisters to me. It was then turned into a nursery for my nieces and nephews when they would come and spend the night. The nursery is the name the room kept, and is still called the nursery, even though it hasn't been a nursery for 2 decades. The nursery just felt right. It sounded spooky, the room was spooky, and there was, or is, something in that room. My friends growing up were all terrified of the nursery, and to this day, I will still have friends randomly ask me about the nursery, or my home in general, or remind me of a scary story they have about my home. As many people experienced things here, family members, friends of mine, siblings, etc. Whatever haunts this house plays no shame to whoever is there. I started having experiences that I can remember vividly around middle school. My earliest memory was hearing things and getting a strange feeling that something or someone was in my room. It suddenly would feel strange. I can't quite pinpoint the feeling, but it felt uneasy, as if someone was in the room with me. I could hear what sounded like a group of kids running up and down the stairs, and because I moved rooms, my room was now next to the stairs and so was my bed. I had my bed directly against the wall the stairs were adjacent to. The running was loud, scary, and eventually flat out annoying, as it was constant some nights. This was right around the time I started sleeping with the covers over my head every single night in the house. I left a little hole to breathe out of, but my face was covered. I was scared, and I remember the fear still I felt under those covers. I would sweat all night before I would come up from under the blanket. Unfortunately for me, the bed was right up against the wall of the hallway with the staircase, so the running up and down the stairs were common sounds of the night. Running through the hallways, hearing doors slam downstairs. All of this was enough to send me straight to my parents' room, where I'd often end up. My dad, now a retired policeman, working for a company who owned a big hotel in St. Louis City, did not have time for my tales. My mom knew it was true, and my dad thought it was silly. Until he had his own experiences, involving me. It became more evident to me that my house was different when I tried to have sleepovers. My girlfriends in 5th grade all went home when I was having a sleepover for my birthday party. All crying, all afraid, all claiming to hear different things in the house, and even though I begged everyone to stay, every single girl went home. From then on out, I had hotel birthday parties. Another experience I shared with my nephew, who I'm very close with. Harry and I decided we wanted to spend the night in my pop-up tent on the deck. This was around 5th or 6th grade. We actually wanted to stay out there because my cat, who was an indoor cat, escaped and was out roaming in the woods. We thought if we slept in the tent, it would attract the cat home. Loaded up with snacks and covers, we were having our camp out. At some point into the night, we heard noises that we thought were the cat. We unzipped the window to the tent and we saw what looked like a white see-through figure with some sort of dress floating up the deck stairs past our tent and into the house. We were too scared to stay outside, so we went screaming inside, waking up my parents, demanding to sleep on their floor. Why we followed it in, I'm not sure, but I felt safer than staying outside. We both remember this very vividly. Harry's sister and my niece Molly also had an experience. She was napping in the nursery and woke up crying hysterically, claiming she saw a dog with red eyes underneath the chair in the room. She still remembers and talks about this incident and said it was as clear as day. A dog with bright glowing red eyes staring back at her. There were many nights where my dad would end up running around the home with his gun drawn looking for an intruder. As the noises downstairs, it sounded like someone broke in and was turning the house upside down. Never finding anything, if I already hadn't invited myself, my bed for the night was my parents' floor. A night that made my dad a believer was a night where we were all woken up to something that sounded like a broken window downstairs, followed by people running around. This wasn't the first time. Expecting my dad to come running out, he did. When he was done searching the house, he stood in front of my room to tell me to go to sleep on their floor. He was still apprehensive of what he had heard, and not finding anything, I could see strain and confusion on his face. With me repeating, "I told you we heard things in this house." With him standing there, the beads dangling on my door were then ripped down, one strand at a time. There is no explanation for what happened. Watching the 16 strands or so of beads get yanked off my door one by one felt like an eternity. My stomach in my mouth, my dad flat out shocked, I sprinted into their bed. My dad later tried to tell me it was my grandma who just passed telling me hi. This is laughable. Though my grandma had just died, it most certainly was not her. I definitely did not get a good feeling when this entity was around, and it thrived off my fear. I understood this before I even understood what was happening around me. Among the many encounters I had, there are two that I most often share with people, as they are the ones that are just so bone-chilling and I can't believe they even happened. Even though I vividly can remember, top of the scales paranormal encounters. Growing up telling this story, I was told I was crazy, and I still am, but I know what I experienced, and I know at least someone can attest to somewhat of the same experience, or being able to answer my biggest question. What was it? The night the biggest event I experienced happened, I demanded my bed be moved to the wall shared with the nursery. I think I was a week into the move and feeling good and safe, finally getting a full night of sleep. Things were quiet in the house. I vividly remember things were eerily quiet in the house. Apart from large events, there were always little things going on, but nothing had happened for a bit. I still did my typical routine, pulling the blankets over me, and fell asleep. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night hearing footsteps down the hall, hearing the nursery's door close, and then complete silence for 15 minutes or so. All of a sudden, followed by the loudest booming noises I have ever heard against the wall I shared with the room. It wasn't a knock on the wall. It was a loud boom on the wall. It didn't even sound like it was hitting a wall, but it most certainly was hitting my wall, and it sounded like at that moment the wall would break and something would come beckoning through. I opened my eyes and peeked out and saw the pictures on my wall shaking at each boom that lasted about 3 seconds. Again, it was indescribably loud, like a sound a dungeon door would make being slammed and echoing. Eventually, the pictures flew off the wall, 3 large framed posters, and shattered. The wall was being hit so hard that the pictures on the side of the wall flew off and shattered. One hit the other side of the wall across from it. The others made it a few feet. Then it stopped. There were probably 3 to 5 booms, I honestly don't remember. I was terrified and trying to scream for my parents, but nothing came out. I could move, but I couldn't scream, and I was not about to put my feet on the ground or go out into the hallway. After the crashing noises of the pictures, my parents came rushing in disbelief, seeing the pictures shattered on the floor and me hysterical. My parents did not believe my story. I remember my mom talking to my siblings about it the next day, though. I now know that she believes me, as I've held on to this experience my entire life. There was no one in that room, and there was no way anyone could even make that noise. The booming was deep, loud. It didn't sound like someone hitting a wall. I've nothing to compare it to. This was by far, to this day, one of the most bone-chilling experiences I've ever had. I can't describe the panic inside of me, and I was flat out terrified of whatever was on the other side of the wall. The other experience isn't one that scared me, but has intrigued me and posed so many questions. To this day, I've tried to research what I saw and have come up with nothing. I hope to get answers and feedback by sharing my story. Shortly after the booming on the wall, I got a camcorder for Christmas. I remember asking for a camcorder so I could record the nursery at night. I was determined to catch whatever it was on camera. Not long after having the camcorder, around 14 or 15, I decided that I would set it up in the nursery with a blank tape on record. To my surprise, I caught something I can't explain. About 30 minutes into the recording, I can only describe it as a very small blue light that grew bigger and bigger and bigger, brighter and brighter, and eventually exploded, and the screen went black. You could clearly see the room with the light that was glowing in the centre. I was able to show a few friends and my mom before my nephews recorded over the tape when they used my camcorder without my permission. But the image of the blue ball is burned into my head. I still get chills thinking about it. It wasn't an orb, at least it didn't look like any orb I've ever seen. It was a tiny light that got bigger and bluer until it eventually burst, with white light filling the camera screen. My camcorder battery died shortly after that recording, and it was charged full battery, with that event happening about 30 minutes into recording the nursery. Sometime during the span of using the camcorder, I discovered the huge gravestone in the back of my woods from the late 1800s. I took the camera back to videotape it with my mom, and we did crayon rubbings on top of the gravestone. Neither of us can find the rubbings we did nor remember the name that we got, although we think from the research we did that the name was of a person who owned the farm on the property many years ago, and the video was also taped over. My nephews, again, taping over something I would never be able to get back. My mom lost the rubbings on paper. I have visited the tombstone as the years have passed, but recently I've gone back there only to see it was destroyed and used as stairs for builders who were expanding onto a senior centre that backs to my parents' home through the woods. I'm sure the question of Ouija board use will come up, and yes, I did use the Ouija board. However, I would not allow my friends to use it at my parents' home. We used it once at another friend's home. Only me and my friend, Lynn, were using the board. The other friends sat on the couch refusing to touch it. We placed our fingers on the planchette and asked if anything was in the room. We ended up finding out the person coming through the board was our friend's uncle who had recently passed away. After asking the entity for a sign, the phone started ringing and lighting up. Eventually we got to the point of the entity wanting my friend to pass on a message to her cousin, as her uncle and cousin were estranged. My friend and I had no idea about her uncle passing or the rift between her uncle and her cousin. She refused to pass along the message, but it was then that I realised I might be more sensitive to the paranormal. Eventually, when I was 17, I gave in to the pushing from Lynn to use the board at my house. So just her and I, in my room, used the Ouija board. It didn't take long for something to come through, and with our fingers not even touching the planchette, it was moving and answering questions quickly. The entity on the other side claimed to be a little girl, someone who watched over me and kept me safe, someone who claimed to have died in a fire at a young age. At this time, we were unaware of the use of children to cover up something bad being on the other side and to gain empathy, which is what it did. It gained our empathy and trust. She said she sat on the edge of my bed at night, claiming that there were many entities in the house, both bad and good. Eventually we were done using the board and we forced the planchette to goodbye. Because I still fear what happened, mentioning the name that was given scares me, but it did say her name was Hilary. Hilary was 9, and she did ask during the session if she could remain. I regretfully said yes. A few days after this, I was telling another friend of mine what happened. They informed me to stop talking about it and go home and speak in my room that she's no longer allowed. I still did not realise what this big deal was. It took years to realise what exactly we did and what I allowed. Once I left for college, things calmed down in the home. I always sensed something was with me though, and the interest in the paranormal never left me. My junior year of college, I lived in a town home that was across from a cemetery. My roommates and I started hearing things in the house. It was a 4-person town home, with rooms adjoining with Jack and Jill bathrooms. So 2 roommates shared a bathroom and me and my friend Ali shared a bathroom. It was my room and our bathroom that we would hear running through the bathroom, a door slam and stomping in my room. This went on for weeks. Living in a neighbourhood filled with college kids, we had our neighbours come over who were guys and non-believers. They ended up hearing everything we heard and leaving promptly after. The rest of the year, Ali and I shared her room. And listening to the footsteps and running through the bathroom and then rummaging sounds of someone going through the things in my room. Our other roommates stayed with their boyfriends. Upon moving home from college, I would experience things here and there. Most of what I was used to living with. It wasn't until my now ex-husband, but then husband, and I temporarily lived in my parents' home, and he would experience the things that I did. The running up and down the stairs, the sounds of people outside, and most notably a light going off and on in my room. After unplugging it, and the light turned back on, did he become terrified of the home and of me. After I divorced, I moved back to Eureka. I lived down the street from my parents' home for a while and only recently moved out of the neighbourhood, but still remain in Eureka. My mom still experiences things from time to time. She often awakens to entities coming through her room in the middle of the night. The same man she has seen numerous times, along with other random people who she has only seen once. My brother recently passed away from colon cancer. Each of my siblings have been visited by him in some sort of way. My mom, days after his death, saw him standing over her in her room. My brother's passing prompted me to think how each of my siblings all have some sort of disease that is not passed down through our family line. My sister will be going on to her 2nd kidney transplant sometime this year. All of my siblings have Crohn's disease. My brother, who is alive, has an array of illnesses, making him wheelchair bound and in far worse health than my 81-year-old dad. My brother, who died, was in the best health of all of us. Although he lived with Crohn's, his death was shocking, and it made me wonder if something in the house caused them to be ill. I, thankfully, am pretty much healthy. However, my life has been filled with trauma, starting at a young age and continuing into adulthood. I'd say my life experiences are more than what the average person experiences. Sometimes it seems like every time I turn around, something bad is happening. Now, I can take personal accountability for choosing wrong paths in life as an adult. However, most of my bad luck is just that. Really bad luck. And it makes me think, is something attached to me? Did I open something up using the Ouija board or make it worse? And make me worse? There is no ending to this. The eerie feeling I get when I go into certain rooms of my parents' home still exists. Strange events still exist. My mom having the most recent encounter that lasted days, involving a ball she randomly found on top of their water heater, like a medium-sized rubber ball. My parents are neat freaks to the extreme. My mom would have known if that ball had ever been in the home. She took the ball and put it on her dresser upstairs in their room to show my dad later. When she went to get it, the ball was gone. She came back downstairs and sat down, now feeling apprehensive to tell my dad about a ball she found sitting on their water heater that disappeared. When she looked at my dad, the ball was sitting next to his feet. I know this sounds like a prank. Maybe my dad was just messing with her, but he has sworn he knows nothing about the ball, and quite frankly, just wouldn't make my mom feel crazy by doing that. He may have been a policeman, but he is empathetic. Anyways, my dad put the ball on his end table next to his chair that he sat in the living room. The next day, the ball was again gone. My siblings and I shared text thread with my mom and dad. One of my sisters told her to ask for the ball back and see what happens. Just say it in the family room, she suggested. My mom did. She asked if she could please have the ball back, and the ball showed up a day later on top of the water heater. Whatever's in the house is still active. I still would say I experience paranormal activity even away from their home. Sometimes I will get the same uncomfortable, odd sensation over me that I would get in my room growing up, when it seems as if someone or something came in. I still think about my family home often, and my parents hope to leave the home to me, if it pans out that way. Would I move back? Definitely. I'm not sure what's in the home, but I think it's multiple things. A poltergeist, potentially. Something more evil that was never human. A dark spirit or a shadow figure. Potentially some good energy there as well. I know for sure, though, that my experiences are ones that most don't ever have with the other side. Ever. But I did. For 6 to 8 years at the most active, I was tormented nightly by something I will probably never know, but hope to get insight here and opinion back. My home's hauntings remain a topic of conversation, and all of my friends have memories or experiences of their own. I hope that my submission and experiences bring answers, as I've searched for them. I hope to hear opinions of people who have heard countless stories of the paranormal and may have heard similar stories. And I hope to know if I myself should consider the experiences I still have, ones that I have may let in on my own, attachments from the home, and or being overall more sensitive than others. I guess the question is, right, going back to the beginning of this story, does building a house on land that is that rich in history, does that release something, release energy? You know, I hate to use the phrase open a portal, but you know what I mean. And then there's the added dimension that there are loads of gravestones on the land. Maybe it's to do with the spirits, the entities of those people reliving moments in their life, and your house just happens to be there. Because there's so much going on in this house over such a long period of time. It seems absurd to think that it was one entity, one thing. So you've got like cabinet doors opening and slamming shut that you would physically see happening. Disembodied voices, whispering, sounds, people running up and down the stairs, phantom parties and music and talking on the deck. That's one that happens, relatively regularly in haunted house stories, where people hear like a room full of people talking, laughing, listening to music. Is that just sort of stone tape theory, where these memories, moments in time, are being absorbed by the land and then spat back out when the conditions are right? And I genuinely think the wildest thing in this story is the glass of wine flipping over but remaining full. How? Riddle me that. How did that even happen? What a crazy thing to happen. Whatever about like a glass of wine maybe falling off the table or moving across the table, but it flipped over and all the wine stayed in the glass. What the heck? I mean, that is 1000% something showing off, something trying to get your attention. And to me, I think the sounds of like children running around, the sounds of parties on the deck, the sounds of footsteps, I think that's all residual stuff. I think that's all stuff that, has been there. Stone tape theory is being spat back out, regurgitated over time. But things like cabinets open and closing and lights turning on and off and the wine glass flipping over, like that all feels like really attention needing behaviours. And it is interesting that these particular incidents were so bad, were so intense, that your dad became a believer. A man who was like completely skeptical. This isn't happening in the way that you think it is. There's obviously a reasonable explanation. Is then, up in the night because people are breaking into the house. Well, what he thinks are people breaking into the house. The sounds of people running around. Witnessing the beads be like pulled off your door frame in front of his eyes. Like seeing those things and going, actually, I don't have any explanation for that. It's pretty incredible. And I do agree. I think that having teenagers in the house, first of all, creates a certain energy And also, if you've got traumatic incidents that are going on, if you are struggling emotionally, if you are struggling in terms of, managing on a day-to-day basis, and I was also a dramatic teenager, so, I get that life. Does that attract things? Does that make you more open, more susceptible to things that are happening in the house? If your brain, if your psyche is already struggling a bit because you're going through a lot of emotional turmoil, are you then more in tune with the things that are going on around you? Like if you were more emotionally well, if you were functioning at like tip-top emotional capacity, would that mean that you just wouldn't notice these things? Or does the kind of emotional turmoil fuel the thing that is happening in the house? Does the emotional turmoil give it the energy that it needs to manifest in this way? And I know at one point in your story you said that this entity, whatever it was, thrived on fear, especially when you guys were younger. And I see that. Like, maybe that's what it was, having these kids in the house, like you obviously, and your nieces and nephews in the house. Maybe that fear is what fueled the entity. And what I also think is really interesting is that so much of this haunting is characterized by sound. So you don't actually have very many physical manifestations that you physically see. So you've got a white figure, a translucent dress-wearing entity that you see outside the tent and that moves into the house, right? Terrifying. And you have the blue light captured on the camcorder, again, terrifying. Like an orb that grew, expanded and exploded. If I think of a portal, I've said portal twice now, which I'm annoyed with myself over. But if I think of a portal 3 times, that is the sort of thing that I think of, this light, this orb that grows and expands and gets bigger and bigger and bigger and allows things through. Maybe there was something in the nursery that was allowing entities through, especially in light of your story where you had the loud booming against the nursery wall, like so loud that it made pictures fly off the wall. Like what an absolute terrifying thing to happen. It's one thing to have knocks on the wall, but it's another thing to have this booming that can cause physical damage, and feel like something is about to burst through the wall. That is terrifying. Like, surely that's designed to frighten the person. Surely that's designed to cause fear. And maybe, as you move through your life, experiences with the paranormal almost become like muscle memory. That you were more susceptible to the paranormal for whatever reason. We could speculate about that till the end of time. But that your experiences in your home house made it so that you were more likely to have experiences elsewhere. I do think as well, and I'm going to say this, and it might be a controversial thing to say, that in terms of using the Ouija board, I personally find it difficult to get on board with this idea that demons disguise themselves as little girls or small children or whatever. I think that's almost like a Zach Bagans-ism, if you know what I mean. Like that it's something that is has been kind of Hollywoodized and is put forward in kind of modern ideas around demonology, and I use the term demonology loosely. I just think that demons probably have better things to be doing. You know what I mean? And I don't think they're disguising themselves as small children. And not even demons, this could be a conversation about kind of negative entities or whatever. I just don't think they're disguising themselves as small children. Maybe I am wrong. I don't know. And I'm not trying to say that this experience didn't happen to you. That's not remotely what I'm saying. I think in this situation, it'd be difficult not to worry about attachments. And also, it sounds like your family has been through the mill in terms of health concerns. And I'm really sorry for that. That must be really just so difficult to lose your sibling and to have all these different health concerns. It probably does feel like everything connected to the house is sort of negative, But it is interesting that you would live there again if the time came. And I totally understand that. It's still your home. It's still where you were brought up. It's still where, you have lots of good memories too, lots of positive memories. What a fascinating story. And it is fascinating to hear that things are still happening to this day. Like with the ball moving around the house, this random unexplained ball. It sounds to me like whatever is in the house is sort of desperately, I think it sounds like a mix of desperately seeking attention and then residual energy. And I am fascinated by it. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Bree for sending in your story. Remember, this story came from the 31st of October 2024. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month you get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
Worried about what ingredients are hiding in your groceries? Let us take the guesswork out. We're Thrive Market, the online grocery store with the highest quality standards in the industry. We restrict 1,000 plus ingredients, so you can trust that you'll only find the best high-quality, organic, and sustainable brands, all free of the junk. With savings up to 30% off and fast carbon-neutral shipping, you get top trusted groceries at your door, and you can stop worrying about what your kids get their hands on. Start shopping at thrivemarket.com/podcast for 30% off your first order and a free gift.